Hi everyone, I'm Lauren Does Cosplay and I am back with another Anastasia build video. It's been a minute! I'm not gonna fact check this, but I'm pretty sure in one of my last Anastasia build videos I said that I would be like uploading every month. That hasn't happened. So today I'm going to walk you through how I made my Grand Duchess Anastasia dress. So the dress, this is the dress that she wears at the end of the movie. It's often referred to as either her coronation gown or her Grand Duchess Anastasia dress. And I'm gonna put out a wide alarm right now that I am not doing a historically accurate recreation of this dress. With all of my Anastasia dresses, my goal is to recreate exactly what I'm seeing in the cartoon and bringing it to life. Before you comment on how the materials I'm using aren't historically accurate, the shape isn't historically accurate, I don't care. I literally don't care because that's not what I'm going for. I'm going for a cartoon to real life recreation. Also, if you've been following me for some time, you'll know that for the last 4 years, I've been making all of the dresses that she wears in the movie, and this is the last one that I've made. So this is like the Grand Duchess Anastasia gown, and it is my grand finale to this series of making all of her dresses, so that's very exciting. Okay, so a little bit about this dress. We're gonna break down the components of this dress. First, we have the pink underskirt. Then we have, Jesus Christ, I'm sweating. Then we have the decorative overskirt. Hello, Rosie. Hello. I suppose you could make the outer decorative part all one piece. I chose to split it into an overskirt and a bodice piece. When I look at the cartoon, I see the pink skirt underneath is just a flat pink. The gold overgown is a sparkly gold. The lighter yellow strips that are sort of embellishing the center of the dress are a matte yellow or a non-sparkly yellow, and then her sleeves are sort of an off-white cream depending on what frame of the animation you pause at. Famously very inconsistent animation. So I've already had people like critiquing and saying that the colors aren't right, saying that I'm missing things. Pretty much throughout the whole movie, the animation is very inconsistent. With this dress in particular, when I was working on the sash, I was trying to think of like if she has a little brooch or anything. And there is in like 2 frames. She's got a little circular oval brooch that's holding on the sash, and then it's never in the animation again. When I think of the dress, I think of that as not being there, so that's what I went with. I didn't put a brooch there. And then again, like the colors vary a lot in that whole sequence that she's wearing the dress, so I did my best to match the colors as best as I could. If you want to go with different colors, live your truth. It's just what I did. Then moving on, we have sort of like a bluish periwinkle sash, and then the crown and accessories, and that's the dress. Oh, my fabric choices. Before any of you get in your little keyboard and start typing about my fabric choices, first of all, I don't want to hear it. Second of all, I know, right? Like, I know what I don't like, and I know what wasn't fun to work with. So just in terms of my thought process on the materials that I chose for this dress, I do not like getting fabric online. So I have a great local fabric store. They have a fantastic selection, and even if they don't have like the perfect materials for every build, I'll usually prefer to get something that's close enough there than shop online. So the day that I shopped for fabrics for this dress, it was a lot of like, I think this could work. This is close enough. So the fabric that I got for the pink skirt, I'm not crazy about. I would have preferred something that was more like satiny, swishy, soft. The fabric that I got is it's a little bit stiffer. Actually, I ended up using the underside of the fabric for it because the other side is like shiny, but not in a good way. Literally the only pink that my store had, so it was good enough. It's a little bit on the dark side, whatever. And then the 2 fabrics that I used for the main gold of the dress, I'm not the biggest fan of. I would have much preferred to just use one fabric that was like the perfect sparkly gold, but I couldn't find that. So what I ended up using was a stretch, like yellowy gold, which first of all, nightmare. And then over top, my fabric store had like a sparkly gold organza. So I layered those 2. Both fabrics were a nightmare to work with, and especially like together, the way that they work together was really awful. So yeah, if I had to make it again, I wouldn't use those fabrics. I would definitely shop for something else. That's what I had. Okay, I think that's all the disclaimers that I wanted to get out of the way. So without further ado, here's how I made this dress. Okay, I'm going to start by making the pink underskirt of the dress. I'm not using a pattern, but I did use just like a basic full circle skirt calculator to determine my waist circumference, and then I used a ruler to measure from that point to the length that I wanted the skirt to be. I did also make sure to include seam allowance at the bottom for hemming later. For a full circle skirt like this, you end up having one big semicircle piece in the front and then 2 quarter pieces for the back that allow for a zipper install later. I'm doing French seams on all of my skirts, so I put my fabrics wrong side to wrong side first, sewed those together, and then trimmed the seam allowance, and then I folded the seam back right side to right side so it encases the raw edge and gives a clean French seam. Here's what it looked like with those 3 panels sewn together. I decided to go with an invisible zipper closure on this skirt, so I installed that, and then I made a strip of bias tape with the same pink fabric for the waistband. I machine stitched on the waistband to the front side and then hand sewed it down to the inside of the skirt. And that was it for the underskirt, easy peasy. I used the same circle skirt calculator for the gold skirt, but slightly tapered it longer towards the back of it to create a small train. An important note, because this skirt is open in the front, I had my large semicircle panel in the back of the skirt this time, and instead of quarter panels on either side in the front, they ended up being about an 1/8 panel to account for the opening of the dress and for the additional panel of fabric that would be included later. Depending on your fabric choices, you may only have to do this once, but I used a gold fabric and a gold glittery organza over top, so I did have to do this twice for both layers. I repeated the steps from the pink skirt and sewed together the 3 panels of the gold fabric, and then again sewing together the panels of the organza layer, all with French seams. I then did a quick mock-up for the shape of the lighter yellow panels running down the front of the skirt. From what I can tell in the animation, that panel is a little bit more narrow towards the waist and widens slightly toward the hem. I cut out these panels, interfaced them, and then sewed one of the edges to the opening panels of the skirt. And for now, that's where we're going to leave off on the underskirt portion, but we'll come back to it. Hello, me again. This is the portion that you're gonna be really frustrated with me because I didn't film how I draped the bodice of this dress because I have never done anything like that and I didn't know what I was doing and it took me a million mock-ups and I was kind of just winging it. This top is very funky. It's off the shoulder, but it's got sleeves. I wanted it to be boned. It's got this very difficult, like squiggly, that lighter yellow is a very like crazy shape to work with. I basically spent 3 days just draping it on my mannequin and hoping for the best. I did try a few patterns that just didn't really work for me, that didn't look quite right, so I was just winging it, didn't know what I was doing. And another note before I get into showing you how I did the bodice, I again have never made like a fully boned bodice top like this before, and I failed to reduce my seams all the way around because this bodice pretty much just fits my waist to the shape that it is, which is great, but there's no, there's no cinching happening. So that is something that I would do differently if I was going to make this dress again. So I don't have any tips for you other than you might have to drape it yourself as well. I'm so sorry. I know that's not helpful at all. Anyway, back to it. So we're starting post-draping and cutting my pattern pieces onto the many layers of the bodice fabric. I knew I wasn't going to want visible boning channels on my outer layers of the dress, so I knew it was going to go into the inner lining. I started with my lining layer, and my first attempt to bone, it was by creating channels in the seam allowance, but my seam allowances actually weren't big enough for this, and quickly became apparent that that was not going to work. What I ended up doing was making another lining layer of this sort of off-white fabric, and sewing channels for boning into those 2 layers, treating it as one, and then using that whole piece as the lining for the main fashion fabric layers. So then I started cutting out the 2 gold layers, and I did initially cut out interfacing layers and ironed those onto all of the gold fabric, but once I sewed the panels together, it was making the fabric very like wrinkly, crinkly, dinkly, weird, and that might have been because my interfacing was a little too firm for this, but it wasn't really working, so I ended up ripping all of the interfacing off of those pieces. I do, however, wish that I had kept the interfacing on the lighter yellow piece in the front center. I ended up with too many horizontal folds in the final product, so either because I needed more boning in that section or needed interfacing on those layers, or both, I'm not sure, but I definitely don't like how that looked in the end. I then sewed my lining and fashion layer together right side to right side along the sides and the bottom edge, leaving just the top edge open. I made the pink trim piece that goes along the top of the bodice, and before attaching that, I sewed on the gold sequin trim around the edges of the lighter yellow panels down the front. Now I'm working on the sleeves, which I just patterned out first with a bit of scrap fabric. The shape ended up being this sort of large leaf shape with a small semicircle off center on the top edge for the armhole because it will be pleated around the top edge when attached. I cut this shape out of the pink fabric and the cream fabric for both sides, sewed those right side to right side, and then turn the sleeves right side out. I attached the white outer fabric onto the bodice by machine and then hand sewed the pink layer onto the inside for a clean finish. Once the sleeves were on, I was able to attach the pink trim along the top edge of the bodice, and I did that the same way that I would a bias tape, and this is where I included those pleats so that it would fit around the outer edge of my arm. Then I moved on to installing the grommets on the back by measuring an even distance down the back, punching holes through the fabric, and then installing the grommets. I quickly made the blue sash with this sort of V shape to more easily drape around my body, and I did that out of 2 pieces, sewed those right side to right side, and then turned it out. I didn't show it, but I did add lacing to the grommets, and that was it for the main structure of the bodice. This was the part where I had to actually start figuring out my little sparkly circles, which there are 7 of on each side of the skirt and then 2 on the bodice. What these are supposed to be in the movie, I can't really tell. They're just some sort of vaguely rainbow iridescent sparkly circles with no discernible texture or source of the sparkle, so I was on a mission to recreate exactly how this looked. I spent so much time doing tests for these with a handful of different materials. I knew I was going to use this gold sequin trim as the border of the circle, but I did try several different options until I ultimately ended up blending 3 of my different tests, settling on the ultimate sparkle factor. So here's how I achieved that look. For the base, I used the same pink fabric from the skirt, and I put that in an embroidery hoop. Then I used this really pretty holographic pink sequin trim and started in the center and spiraled that all the way around to the edge of the circle, just hand tacking that down every few sequins. Once the pink was all the way spiraled out, I edged it out with the gold sequins to finish the circle. Once out of the embroidery frame, I cut the fabric close to the edge, and then I hand sewed down the edge to the underside of the circle. I made this nice blend of different bicone crystal beads in the colors light pink, clear, and gold. Then over top the base of my sequin circle, I evenly spread a fabric glue and then added a handful of small pink and holographic rhinestones first, and then started spreading out my bead blend in all of the open space. If you're wondering why I used glue instead of embroidering these beads on, I couldn't actually sew through the sequins as they were the base. The glue held really well, so it wasn't really a problem. I've had like a few of them pop off, but just glue them back on. Doing this with all 16 circles took a very long time. The larger circles took about 3 hours each. They ended up being like 4.5 inches in diameter, and I think the smaller circles were about 3 inches, and those ones would take about an hour, so yeah, long time to make all of these. Once they were all dry and the glue was set, I was able to start attaching them to the skirt. I made sure to mark out the placement first to keep all of my spacing very even on all sides, and then I glued them on with the same fabric glue. I used a chalk pencil to map out where the little swishy connecting sequin lines would be, and then I used fabric glue to attach these sequin strips between the circles. The last step was just to hand sew the inside of that panel to the base of the skirt, and then the dress was done! This was immediately after I finished it, and I could not stop admiring how it looked with the flash on it, and it was just so sparkly and gorgeous! Okay, this is the first time that I'm trying it on all together. Here it is! Oh, I think it turned out so pretty. My hair is not how I would want it if I was doing a photo shoot because I can't see and I couldn't do it myself. But fabrics were a struggle to work with, but especially from afar, the silhouette is there. There she is, the final dress in the series. Gorge! All right, everyone, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that it is helpful if you're making your own Anastasia dress. I know a lot of my videos are, I don't know, maybe less tutorial and more just like, this is how I did mine. There are a million other ways that you can do it, and I highly recommend changing things and doing whatever works for you and using techniques that you're more comfortable with. This is just how I made mine. If it can be helpful to you in any way, then I'm very happy. I know I say this every video, but I really am going to try to be better at posting more consistently. A lot of my builds I do very quickly, so I end up not recording horizontal like for YouTube format, but this year I'm going to be better. I'm going to be better, I swear. I have more coming. And also, since I was last here, I hit 100,000 subscribers on here, which is so cool, and I got my little YouTube plaque. So if you like this video, please subscribe. I'm going to be posting more. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Girl, I'm sweating, I'm sweating, I'm sweating.